Hi, my name's Philip, and today we will be creating a dice generator in Excel. If we click a button here, it'll automatically re-roll a D2, a D4, all the way up to a D20. And if we roll a 20 on our D20, it'll show green, and if we roll a 1, it'll show red. The last dice we have replicates an actual dice, so when we roll this, it'll look like a normal dice. And then the button on the far right will roll every dice. Let's get started and create this from scratch. You can also download this spreadsheet for free. Follow the link in the description. Let's start off by formatting our spreadsheet. We'll highlight A through AI, and then we will right click, change our column width to 5, and then our first row, right click, row height. We'll change this to 53.25. Rows 2 through 4, right click. Row height will be 24.75. Next, we'll create 7 blue dice and then 1 gray dice. Highlight all 9 squares. We'll go up to our colors and we'll choose this one right here. And if you Control C, Control V, and then we'll do this, but then we'll change it to gray. Next, we'll create the D6 in our gray square that will populate dots when a specific number has been selected. So let's pull up a picture of what the dice look like. And now what we'll do is we'll create functions to populate those cells if a certain number has been reached. We'll start off by using an if function. We'll start here and say if AE6 equals 6, then we want to populate L. And this will make sense in a second. If it does not, we want to populate nothing. And then close that. So what we'll do is we'll create all these functions and then we'll highlight them all and change them to the font type called Wingdings. So whenever an L is populated using that font, it'll populate a dot rather than the number or the letter. So if we think about what the dice look like, if we pull this picture back up, we just created the function for this spot right here. Now that is the same function for this spot over here. So what we'll do is we'll copy this function, Control C, enter, and then we'll paste it over here. Now let's create our next function. If AE6 equals 6, populate L. If not, then we want to do nothing. And if you notice, there is a space right here. So we hit enter, but we need to add a few more criteria. So we'll create additional criteria using an OR function. And this will simply allow us to populate more numbers. So for example, we'll say if AE6 equals 2, AE6 equals 3, 4, or 5, populate L. If not, leave it blank. So I'll fast forward the video and populate that for us. This is our completed function up here. So let's test this. Let's see if it works. If we put a 6 here, this is populating this one and this one. Let's pull up our dice real quick. We just created our top left dot, and now the bottom right dot can also have the same function as this. So we'll copy this, Control C, and then paste it, Control V. Now if we change this, you'll see they'll disappear. But if we have a 5, the top left and the bottom right will show. So here's a 5. Next, we'll create the bottom left and the top right functions. I'll fast forward the video to show you that function. And now this is our function for our bottom left, and we'll copy this, Control C, and paste it, top right. We have just one more function to create. And this is our last function. Now let's change the font to Wingdings. And we'll test our dice. 1. Looks good. We'll increase our font to 36. And we will center. Next, we will create a button which will auto-populate our numbers. Now there are two ways to do this. We can create a RANDBETWEEN function, and what this does, you can put a number and then a second number, and it will auto-populate between those two numbers. However, the issue is if we had multiple RANDBETWEENs, every time we refresh one of them, the other one would also refresh. So what we need to do is create a VBA code for a button that specifically attaches to one of our dice. That way we can refresh one dice at a time and not all of them. The first step in creating this code, we need to go up to our Developer tab. If you don't have the Developer tab, right-click on your ribbon and go to Customize Ribbon, and you can add it over here and then hit Add. Mine's already added, so you won't find it on the left. With the Developer tab selected, go to Visual Basic, and what we'll do is go into Insert, Module, and we'll create our first macro, sub, and we'll call it dice underscore D2. Enter, and we'll input this information, range. Range is where you want the macro to populate the information, and then the application is equal to our function, which is the RANDBETWEEN. This is our first macro, and what we'll do is we'll create a macro for each button. So a D4, D6, D8, 10, 12, 20. And then we'll finish it off by creating a macro for our all dice roll. I'm going to fast forward the video and have that information input. Now we will switch back to our Excel spreadsheet. And now that those macros have been created, what we'll do now is create those buttons and tie those macros to those buttons that correspond to the correct dice. Go up to Insert, click Button, and then click and hold. We'll tie the D2 macro to this, and then we'll go up to Shape Format, and we'll change this to 0.73 and then 1.25. And we will move this up. At this point, we'll copy this, right click, copy, Control V, and we're going to copy a bunch of these. And then highlight the in-between columns. Change the column width to 0.58. Let's rename the buttons, and then we'll assign macros to each of the buttons. This first one we already assigned a macro to, so we'll rename it Roll D2, and we'll check to see if it works. It does. You can see down here on C6, it's changing every time I click the button. And now I'm going to fast forward the video, but I'll rename the rest of these buttons, with the last one being Roll All Dice. Next, we'll assign all the macros to the buttons. So let's do that and start with our D4 assign macro. We'll choose D4, hit OK, and then let's see if it works. It is working. So now what we'll do is we'll assign each macro to the corresponding button. Let's test the buttons to make sure they all work. Looks like they all do. Now what we need to do is tie the numbers to our dice, and we can do that by clicking on our dice, hit equals, and then click on the number below and highlight the whole dice, go up to Home, Merge and Center, and let's increase our font, center, and change the font color to white. We'll copy this same process for each dice. We will now create a conditional format for our D20. So go up to Home, Conditional Formatting, go to New Rule, Format only cells that contain, drop this to equal to 1, change our format, and our fill will change to red. Hit OK. And then when this is a 1, it'll show red. So let's do this again. Change it to green when we hit 20. New rule, format only cells that contain, equal to 20, format green, hit OK. And then when this is 20, it'll show green. The last step is to highlight row 6, and we'll change our color to white so you can't see those. And then we will remove our grid lines. I do want to point out, if you create macros within your spreadsheet, you have to save your spreadsheet with macros enabled. Go up to File, Save As. And when you go up to save, make sure you have Macro-Enabled Workbook, and then save. The last thing I want to point out, if you embed a macro into an Excel document, you will be prompted with this enabled content. This is a security measure because viruses can be embedded into macros. So only open links to Excel documents that you trust. If you follow the link in the description, you will be prompted to enable content. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. And if you have any thoughts on another dashboard you'd like me to make, leave those in the comments as well. If you'd like to support my channel, you can like and subscribe. Also, this spreadsheet is available for free if you follow the link in the description. Thanks.